Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video I have my double game week 19 team selection. It is the first double game week of the season and I am looking to transfer at least one, probably two double game week players into my team. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump to today's video. So I'm recording this on Saturday evening, Saturday the 31st of December. I hope you've had a good 2022, and if you haven't, I hope 2023 is the year for you, and I hope you start it strong, both in FPL and your everyday lives as well. But because I'm recording this on the 31st, all of my players have played. They've all got their points. However, there are still two games that will be going ahead on the 1st of January. I don't own any players from Chelsea, from Forest, from Spurs, or from Villa. So I won't be getting any points from the 1st of January. So at the moment, I'm actually on a small green arrow. However, I'm almost certain that unless all of those players blank, and even so, I could still be on a red arrow. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a red arrow. That being said, it shouldn't be too big. So I've worked out if Chelsea keep a clean sheet and if Kane gets like a 9 pointer, he could get more, of course. I'm probably looking at about 2.5 to 3k. So even if worst case scenario, everything goes terribly wrong on the first of those final two games in game week 18, it should still be an okay rank going into double game week 19. So for this week, very, very quickly to review it, there are a lot of disappointments. Manchester City conceding again was a massive disappointment because that's 2 weeks in a row that Cancelo hasn't started. I've been a little bit smug at the start, like, yeah, Ederson starts, and then he concedes twice. I think they only conceded 2 shots on target in both games as well. So City aren't conceding many shots, but when they do, they seem to concede. White coming off 59th minute, I think it was 59 minutes and 42 seconds. It was something like, it was just under 20 seconds before banking the clean sheet. White comes off for a 1-pointer. He was actually on for 1 or 2 bonus points if he got the clean sheet as well. So we're at 20 seconds away from a 7 or 8 pointer from White. And instead we walk away with a 1-pointer. Foden being benched and then coming on in the 86th or 87th minute, which actually blocked a 5-pointer from Andreas on the bench. That was super disappointing. Darwin and Salah were missing big chances for fun. They have now missed between them 27 big chances in the Premier League this season. So that was very frustrating. Martial just didn't play very well. I can't really complain about that. I don't think he deserved to get any returns. Rashford being benched due to a disciplinary issue, a very annoying one once again. So it was one of those weeks where a little bit of bad luck, a little bit of frustration, but I am also lucky that the likes of De Bruyne and Almiron also blanked, because I think when I have a week as bad as my team has been, because they really have, apart from a couple of players, they haven't done well, I'm lucky that in that week, the players that I don't own that are very highly owned by everyone else also don't perform. Because if Almiron had got a 10-pointer, De Bruyne got like a 12 or 13-pointer, all of a sudden, rather than a small green arrow, I'm looking at a huge red, and then the likes of Kane still to play as well. So I am quite lucky there. The absolute saviour for me, because Trippier, Martinelli and Haaland are so highly owned, them getting returns don't really do much for me. I'm not getting many points there. The real saviour for me, the only reason I'm on a small green at the moment, is a Luke Shaw 9-pointer. Because he's still only about 30% owned at my rank, and I got the 8-pointer from him last week. So in 2 weeks, Shaw has delivered 17 points for me. The other reason I'm so delighted about that is because I chose to go for Ederson, Shaw, and White, I believe it was, rather than just go for the Kepa Ward combination, Cancelo, and then a cheap defender. Cancelo's obviously been benched 2 weeks in a row. Yes, Kepa outscored Ederson, and I'm sure he's going to outscore Ederson again in game week 18. But the fact that Shaw's got those 17 points kind of justifies the decision a little bit. Because if I'd gone for Cancelo, I would not have picked Luke Shaw. So I'm still really happy with the team that I chose in game week 17 for the unlimited transfers. The only decision I'm not happy with, and I think you could almost have, I don't think this is hindsight bias, I genuinely think it might not have been a great decision, is going for Foden when we saw before the World Cup he was benched in 3 or 4 weeks. I just hoped and expected that he would go back to the Foden at the start of the season when he started 11 or 12 Premier League games in a row. But it appears that he's in Pep's bad books, or Pep wants to play other players ahead of him. I do think he'll start some of the difficult games coming up against the likes of Chelsea and Tottenham and Manchester United, but I don't necessarily expect him to play the amount of minutes that we saw earlier in the season. So for me, Foden is the big mistake. Foden's the mistake I need to correct, and I also need to probably look to remove potentially Reece James as well. So that's the way the team did in game week 18. Small green at the moment, probably going to move to a red arrow tomorrow, the day that you watch this. With that being said, let's take a look at game week 19. So moving ahead to game week 19, I'm going to show you my team, how it currently looks. I actually have 2 free transfers and 0.8 million in the bank. The reason it says 1 free transfer is I'm almost certain I'm going to make a move. And usually I'm just really not sure at the start. But because it's such a short gap, and because I really want to get rid of a player, and I also want to target the double game week 19 doublers, there's a player that I'm pretty sure I'm going to bring in. So I've put him in my team, and then I'll say I've got one more free transfer after that. So hopefully that makes sense. I haven't actually made any transfers at the moment, but one of them I'm pretty sure I'm going to make. And then I basically need your help, and I'm going to discuss where I'm going to use that second free transfer. I do think I'm going to use it, but not necessarily 100% sure. I think I have been a little bit passive over the last maybe 6 to 7 weeks. Once I got up to about 149th in the world, which was the best rank I got to, it's almost like you feel like maybe just do nothing. Like the team's doing really well, don't touch it, don't get aggressive, don't take hits. And I'm not saying I'm going to go out and take loads of hits now, but if there's a double game week in front of me, even if it's not a great double game week, I don't necessarily think the Fulham and Chelsea doubles are great, right? Fulham and Chelsea play against each other. Chelsea play against City as well. It's not a great double, but I still think it's a double. You get an extra fixture in there, and some of the players are quite tempting. So I think I'm going to get a little bit aggressive and probably use both of my free transfers and probably look to bring in 2 double game week players as well. So like I said, 0.8 in the bank. I've got 2 free transfers. One of them I'm likely to use. I do have Kepa and Ederson rotation. This was one of the reasons for it, is that I get Kepa for all of the Chelsea doubles and I get Ederson for the City doubles. I still think Ederson was a good pick. It's just very unfortunate that City don't concede much XG, but the 2 chances that they've conceded on target, Ederson has conceded both of them. But I've got Kepa in goal now. City and Fulham. I don't think this is a great double full stop, but I think specifically from a defensive perspective, we're probably not expecting a clean sheet against City, but hopefully Kepa can make some saves. Fulham away, I do think is a decent chance, but again, as I said in game week 18, Fulham have scored in every home game this season, so I am looking at Cucurella as well, as I'll discuss in a second, but maybe this really isn't a very good double from a defensive perspective. Maybe if you don't own any Chelsea defence, you don't necessarily need to go out and break your team to fit them in, because it doesn't look great on paper for clean sheet odds. But even if Kepa gets like a 2-pointer and a 2-pointer, he's walking away with a 4-pointer. Even if Ederson keeps a clean sheet, he's probably not far behind. So I'm definitely playing the double game week keeper. The rest of the defence is fine, but again, it's not ideal for this week. And this is a week where my team, there are a few tricky fixtures. I've got Castagna against Fulham. Leicester don't look great at the moment, but Castagna is still getting forward and attacking, and this is at least at home for Leicester. It's not at Craven Cottage, so I do think there's a small chance for a clean sheet here, and if not, I guess I'm hoping that Castagna gets some returns. The fact that I am starting Castagna at the moment, it does make me think, do I need Fulham attackers? Because I guess I'm backing Kepa to keep a clean sheet there, and I'm backing Castagna to keep a clean sheet, the 2 fixtures that Fulham are playing against. And I guess I'm thinking a little bit about clashes. Let me know down below in the comments, do you think about clashes when you're picking your team? Like, if you had Kepa here against Fulham and Castagna against Fulham, would that stop you from bringing Mitrovic in? Or are you almost considering them as 2 different points? I'm looking at Mitrovic, independent of the defenders that I own. I do have Ben White on the bench. There is definitely justification to start Ben White against Castagna. It is a home fixture for Arsenal. Arsenal just didn't look great against Brighton defensively. And I'll be honest, they've been good this season defensively, but I don't necessarily look at them and think that's the defence that I expect to keep clean sheets every game. They do dominate the ball and they dominate games well, but Newcastle are arguably the second best team in the league at the moment after Arsenal. I could see there being a couple of goals in this, but Newcastle do keep it quite tight. We saw the 0-0 against Leeds, so I'm not sure. Let me know down below. Would you start Castagna? Would you start Ben White? I've got Reece James on the bench as well. We'll discuss maybe Reece James replacements in a second. I've got Trippier in the starting 11. You would argue that there's probably slightly higher likelihood that Arsenal keep a clean sheet than Newcastle, just because it's at the Emirates, and also Arsenal are top of the league and they're playing well. But Newcastle, I think, are the best defence in the league at the moment. They've got the most clean sheets this season, and Trippier is just an absolute bonus points monster, and he's got so much attacking threat too. I feel like Trippier is almost you play him every single week, unless he's got like Man City and everyone else has a double. I think unless it's a terrible fixture or there are loads of doublers, I think you just play Trippier every week. So for me, I think I'm going to play Trippier ahead of Castagna, ahead of White. I think he's one of my top choice defenders every single week. And then the final starting defender is Luke Shaw. Like I said, an 8-pointer and a 9-pointer in the last 2 weeks. This season, I feel like I've chosen the defenders quite well. I chose Castagna ahead of his really nice run when he got like 6 clean sheets in a row. And I've got Luke Shaw ahead of this run. Bournemouth at home looks like a great fixture there. The fact that it's at home, I really do like that. I don't really trust Manchester United away from home this season. But at home, we tend to dominate on the ball. I expected Luke Shaw to play at left back in game week 18. But Martinez wasn't quite ready. I think he'll be ready for game week 19, in which case we should see Shaw move back to left back. The good thing about him playing at centre back is at centre back he picks up loads of bonus points. He's even more of a bonus points monster. So if he plays at left back, we've got attacking threat. If he plays at centre back, we've got the really good chance of bonus points. So either way, I think that Luke Shaw and Trippier are the best two defenders to own at the moment. It just comes down to who you want in that third spot. But I do think Trippier and Shaw should be in most of your teams. And if you don't own either of them, I still think they're great buys. Yes, Shaw has tricky fixtures in 20 and 21. But after that, Manchester United have 3 home games in 4 weeks. And they're really nice fixtures too. So I think long term, Shaw is a great buy. If you don't pick him up this week, you can probably wait until about game week 22 to bring him in. If I am looking at Reece James replacements this week, the only defender that makes sense for me this week is Cucurella. The reason I say that is I've got Castagna, Trippier, Shaw, and I've got Ben White on the bench. I don't need to bring in another defender with a single game. I don't need to rush that transfer through. I'm going to make another transfer. I could then just roll the transfer if I don't want to replace James, and then I'll have 2 free transfers going into game week 20, or I could just make an attacking transfer instead. The only way it would make sense to take out James this week for me is to bring in a doubler and to play that doubler ahead of Castagna. So I guess I've got to think to myself, is Cucurella against Man City and Fulham much better than Castagna against just Fulham? And it's a home for Fulham. It's a home for Leicester, I should say, whereas it's away for Cucurella. When I say that in my head, if I'm not expecting them to get much against City, and it's at Craven Cottage, the Fulham game, maybe I just back Castagna to do fairly well this week, or maybe I just play Ben White instead. Let me know down below in the comments if you think Cucurella is a much better option than Castagna or Ben White this week. Maybe he is. Maybe I just get aggressive, like I said, and just target the double. But at the moment, I'm not sure. So that's the defence. Let's move on to the midfield 4. So taking a look at the midfield, I'll start with the transfer this week, which is, like I said, about 99% sure I'm going to make. Not 100%. I haven't made it yet, but I think I'm going to, which is Foden to Mount. Now, Foden has been a disaster pick. Like I said in the start of the video, I expected him to start most of the games over this period. I thought it was maybe a disciplinary issue that Pep dealt with before the World Cup. I still don't even know if it was disciplinary, but I just don't understand how Foden, and I genuinely mean it when I say this, I think he's one of the best players in world football. I think he's that talented. I think he's a generational talent. I don't understand how he's not getting into that City lineup. So I assume there's an issue going on there, or maybe he's not training well, or Pep knows something that we don't. Either way, I don't want to keep Foden in my team. I don't care if they've got double game weeks. It just makes no sense for me. 8.2 million or 8.3 million, whatever he is. It makes no sense to just keep him for that run. Because, yes, City have 2 doubles, but if he's only starting every other game, or at the moment starting like 1 in 3 or 4, then it's just not worth it regardless of the fixtures that they've got coming up. So I think you can always justify keeping him. And if you told me I'm going to keep Foden for 1 more week, I understand that. But it just keeps on ticking along. Because then if he gets to start, you then keep Foden again. Maybe Foden's in the starting 11. No, then he gets benched again. You go, well, he's just been benched. So maybe because he's been benched, he'll start. And the cycle just continues. And this is what happens with Pep players. I've done it in the past with Mahrez. I've done it in the past with Sterling as well. Whether they get benched or whether they start, you can always justify keeping that City player. But for me, there are so many good options at that price with the double game week coming up. And then after that as well, I think I'm going to sell Foden this week. If I don't sell Foden this week, he'd probably be on the bench anyway. So if he scores against Chelsea, I wouldn't have played him regardless. He would have been benched or sold. The reason I'm going for Mount at the moment, as opposed to someone like a Saka, an Erdegaard, and Almiron, is I want to attack the double. And I do have transfers. If I don't use both transfers this week, I'll have 2 in 20. Even if I use both this week, I'll still have 1 in 20 and then obviously 1 in 21 as well. So I can move to Mount now, have him for the double, maybe the decent fixture in 20 as well. I think it's like Crystal Palace or someone like that. And then maybe move him on after that for the likes of a Saka, an Almiron, or an Erdegaard, who are 3 of the players that I'm really looking at. I think Saka is extremely tempting because he's on penalties, he's playing incredibly well, and his data's really strong. But Saka is on 4 yellows, and I think Arsenal have 3 more games they have to play before that threshold goes to 5. So if Saka picks up a booking over the next 3 games, then he misses a game. And their fixtures still aren't great, Arsenal, for the next 2 or 3. So I think it makes sense to attack the double with Mount. Then after the double, if I want to keep Mount, if he's still looking good, I can. And then I can look to move to the single game week players in the likes of, like I said, Almiron, Erdegaard, and Saka. Or we might have more doubles announced. We've had the suggestion that Brighton could get a double. Maybe I look for Trossard or for Gross or for someone like that. So I've got the options there. I think I'm going to attack it with Mount. The other reason I like Mount is I think I want to captain a double game week player. The only 2 that I own at the moment before transfers are Kepa and Andreas. I'm not going to captain Kepa for the reasons I listed. I don't think it's a great double from a defensive perspective. Andreas isn't a bad captain, but one of the fixtures is against Chelsea, and you would expect Chelsea to largely dominate that game. And his data is okay. Now, if Mitrovic wasn't playing and he was on penalties, you could argue that being on pens would make him great, but then I guess he's a slightly worse option if Mitrovic isn't there. I just feel like I don't know why. I don't know if it is. It may be genuinely, it could be the price, but something feels wrong about captaining Andreas. I don't know if it's because it's Fulham or because he's cheap or because he's not a penalty take. Something just feels wrong about Captain Andreas. Let me know down below in the comments if you feel very similarly to me. Maybe I need to update my thinking, ignore his price, ignore the fact that he plays for Fulham, and just think his data's good, he's on set pieces, he's got Leicester, which is a decent one, plus an additional fixture in Chelsea. Maybe Andreas is a decent captaincy shout. I just feel slightly safer captaining Mount. I suppose my only slight concern about captaining someone like a Mount or a Havertz is, can we 100% confirm that they play both? No. And if Mount only plays City at home and is then benched for Fulham, that's an absolute disaster captaincy, because you probably don't expect much against City. Could get a single return, but you're not expecting much outside of that. And then if he's benched for Fulham, it becomes an issue. In a double game week, I do prefer to captain someone that I know is going to play every minute of that double. Outside of Mount and outside of Andreas, who I've discussed, 2 double game week options, which I'm happy to have. I've got Rashford against Bournemouth. He was benched in game week 18. It looks like it was due to him being late to a meeting because he overslept. I think he'll be fine to go back into the starting 11. Came off the bench, scored. He actually scored 2. 1 was disallowed. Looked great in game week 18. Bournemouth at home is an excellent fixture. I'm definitely starting Rashford. I've got Salah as well. I've said for a while, I don't think you should be switching between Salah and De Bruyne. I think both look okay in their own right. Salah and Darwin are just missing big chances left, right and centre, but at least they're getting big chances. De Bruyne, a little bit annoying if you own him, because he's been creating so many chances, but again, he's not much of a goal threat himself, so he is very reliant on those around him converting the chances, and unfortunately at the moment, they're missing the chances that he's creating. The 5th and final midfielder that I have is Martinelli. At the moment on my bench, the reason for that is I think I prefer the other 7 attackers I've got at the moment. We'll move on to the forwards in a second. You can let me know down below if you think I should start Martinelli. But I think all of the other 7 have arguably a better fixture. And at the moment, I'm looking at starting Trippier. So I think if all of the other 7 have a slightly better fixture, I'm starting Trippier anyway, so I'm hopefully banking on a Newcastle clean sheet. I guess I'm betting against Arsenal scoring goals, so it makes sense to bench Martinelli, to bench White, and I guess to hope that Newcastle come out on top in that game. It doesn't feel great, though. Having Ederson on the bench, having Martinelli on the bench, and having White on the bench doesn't feel great. If I do James to Cucurella, it would be Castagna on the bench, and my bench would be Ederson, Castagna, Martinelli, White. That's arguably as good as you're going to get for a single game week bench boost. So if you're looking at a bench boost this week, I don't hate it, but for me, I do prefer to play my bench boost in a big double game week where the players on my bench also have double fixtures. So that's the way the midfield 4 lines up if I do Foden to Mount. Let's move on to the 3 forwards and then discuss the second transfer that I might make. So moving on to the forwards, and this is the first time in a very long time that I'm not captaining Haaland. I just don't think this makes sense to captain him, but I definitely understand if you just go permanent. I've seen people just say, it's perma captain Haaland. You captain him every week, you don't think about it, and he will get you points every single week. And I definitely appreciate that perspective. Chelsea away isn't a terrible fixture, but if there is a week to back against Haaland, this is definitely it. Not only does he have a tricky fixture, but other single game week players have very good fixtures, and you've got decent attackers with a double game week as well. So I'm going to be backing against Haaland this week. I won't be captaining him. I will be captaining a double game week player. That's just the way that I play the game. I just prefer to do so. Which double game week player I captain largely depends on who I bring in and what I think about over the coming days. But I do think that Havertz, Mount, Andreas and Mitrovic are all fine. I wouldn't necessarily captain a defender just because you're reliant on clean sheets. And both Fulham and Chelsea's double game week I don't think is great from a defensive perspective. So I really do think it's one of those 4. Andreas, Mitrovic, Havertz, Mount. For me, I'm going to probably be captaining one of the 4. But obviously, I'm not going to be selling Haaland. I'm fine. If you want to captain Haaland, I fully appreciate the justification. But for me, I'm not going to be doing so. Darwin and Martial, I said this in game week 18, but even more so going into game week 19. I definitely understand if you want to sell either of these. I think Mitrovic is an excellent option if you hope that he doesn't pick up a yellow card in the first fixture of game week 19. He's got a double game week. He's on penalties. Looks really good. Fulham are scoring goals this season quite well. His underlying data is stronger than Martial's, just under Darwin's, because Darwin is an absolute underlying stats monster. So I understand if you want to bring in Mitrovic. And same with Havertz as well. If you've got a third Chelsea spot and you're not blocked from getting Havertz, I really like Havertz too. I'm finding it very tricky myself to sell Martial and Darwin. Martial is the number 9 for Manchester United, a team that are playing very well and scoring goals. I know they only won 1-0 in game week 18, but Wolves defended relatively well in that game. It's Bournemouth at home. If you were to ask me, independent of FPL, predict Manchester United against Bournemouth at home, you let me know in the comments as well. 3-0, I think I would say something along the lines of. So do I want to start Martial, Rashford and Shaw? Definitely. And I don't even think that's Manchester United bias. Bournemouth are one of the worst teams in the Premier League this season. Manchester United are very good at home, and we would expect Martial to start once again. So I'm having trouble selling Martial. And I know Darwin, and I've been saying about this on Twitter and making jokes about it, it's very difficult and frustrating to own Darwin. He's now missed in 2 games, it's either 6 or 7 big chances in the last 2 games since we brought him in. So I understand why you might want to sell him and why it's difficult to own him. But then I try and think he's got 7 big chances in 2 games. That's not even including the slightly smaller chances which he could score. He's probably got the opportunity to score in the last 2 games, maybe 12 or 13 goals. That is remarkable. And yes, his finishing hasn't been good. And yes, he's not taking those chances. And there's only so long you can keep a player that's getting chances if they don't convert them. But if I think with my objective head and I don't let myself get emotional about it, that is a crazy amount of chances to get. And even someone who isn't a good finisher, you would expect to start finishing those chances. And from what we've seen in the past, in previous seasons, Darwin is not a bad finisher. Not only in the Portuguese league, but also in the UCL as well. He was really, really good at converting chances. So I think it's a bit of a confidence thing. I think if Darwin gets 1 or 2 goals, I think he'll start converting a lot more of those chances. But again, I understand if you want to sell him, and I can't really argue with it. The only reason I want to sell either is, like I said, I think Havertz and Mitrovic are both good options. I do believe that probably Mitrovic is the best captaincy option in Game Week 19 if he doesn't get booked against Leicester. The good thing about captaining Mitrovic is that Leicester is the first fixture. So if he gets booked against Leicester and misses the Chelsea game, you've captained Mitrovic against Leicester, which isn't terrible. If the Chelsea game was first, then I would maybe argue that it's not the best captaincy option, because then you're just captaining Mitrovic against Chelsea if you miss the second one. Hopefully that's clear, but I think that's definitely something in favour of captaining Mitrovic. So for the reasons that I've just said, I do think he's the best captaincy option. The best data from the doublers, from an attacking perspective, on penalties, and the most likely to play 180 minutes or at least close to that. But I really don't want to sell Martial or Darwin. So that's the main reason I'm bringing in Mount at the moment and captaining him. So if I don't want to take out Martial and Darwin, the only other option I've really got to attack the doubles is to bring in Cucurella for James. But I've just stated to you that I like Castagna as an option, and I don't think it's a great double defensively for Chelsea. So I'm left in a position where the only reason I'm doing Cucurella is to replace James. And I really do want Mitrovic, but I don't want to sell the players that I would have to sell to bring in Mitrovic. So please let me know down below in the comments what you would do in my position. I want Mitrovic or Havertz, but I can't get Havertz because I'd be on a Chelsea triple up already. I'd have to take a -4 or not do Mount, and I think I want to bring him out for Foden. So I want Mitrovic, but Cucurella is the transfer that makes sense along with Mount, just because James is out anyway, and then I could just play him instead of Castagna, who, listen, Leicester aren't great defensively. There's a good chance that they'd concede anyway. So please let me know what you would do. The Foden to Mount move to captain Mount at the moment looks quite likely. If I do bring in Mitrovic, I think I would give the armband to Mitrovic. If I bring in Cucurella would play instead of Castagna. Hopefully that is clear. There will be a deadline stream on Monday, again, 2 hours before the deadline. So if you want to see my final decision, see that I definitely confirm Mount transfer in, see what my second transfer is, and also see who I decide to captain, do tune into the deadline stream 2 hours before, but let me know down below in the comments what you think at this early stage. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 19 team selection. I do hope it was helpful for you and you enjoyed it. And like I said, do tune into my deadline stream as well. And just a final thank you for all of the support during 2022. I know you'll be watching this in 2023. I'm recording this at the end of 2022. I genuinely couldn't have even imagined that the channel would be as successful as it has been in 2022. I've loved every single second. I love creating content for you. I love the live streams. I love the interactions. And you play such an important part in my life if you watch these videos and you interact with me. So I can't thank you enough. Like I said, I hope you had a good 2022. If you didn't, I hope 2023 is the best year you've ever had. And I'm sure FPL will positively contribute to that as well. So until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.